It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting, either through my website, emailrevealer.com, or you can just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. If you like our show, check out our Patreon. We have a brand new Patreon. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be doing a weekly segment on there with Stephen Hoffenberg, the former partner of Jeffrey Epstein. You can check out the Opperman Report Patreon. And as always, our archives are free. You can check out our archives for free at Spreaker.com. I have today returning Richard Kerr. Richard Kerr, I'll have him explain to you a little bit about himself, but just briefly. As a young boy, his home was destroyed and split apart by the Irish government. And they put him into these boys' homes. One was the Kincora home for boys, where he was sexually abused horrifically, and not only just in the boys' home, but then was taken by intelligence operatives and used for blackmail purposes, and ultimately, again, was victimized by Roy Cohn, who was the New York lawyer, worked for the Kennedys, worked for the anti-communist committee with the, what was that guy's name? McCarthy hearings, and ultimately was the attorney for Donald Trump, the President of the United States. So, Richard Kerr, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Can you remind the audience who was Richard Kerr?
Well, I was born in Ireland, north of Ireland, and I will just correct you on. I was not removed by the Irish government. I was removed by the UK government, because part of Northern Ireland belongs to United Kingdom. And those who are born in the north of Ireland are under the British flag.
Gotcha.
So I wanted to just correct you there. So, yes, I was born in 1961. I was removed from my family and my siblings in December the 15th of 1966. And I was transferred to a orphan first place was called Williamson Heights. And that's when my journey began to this story of my experience.
And since you've come on our show, you've put me in touch with a couple of other people. Colin Wallace, who was an intelligence agent who was investigating all this and tried to go public with it and tried to blow the whistle on all this, and wound up going to prison for 8 years until he was finally exonerated. He only got out a short time ago, and he put you in touch with a gentleman named McMahon, who again had the similar story to yours, but his abuse didn't take place within the homes, took place at his own home by a social worker who worked for the homes and then went to work for the courts covering up these cases. So there's a lot of movement in your case, isn't there?
Well, there is, and since I lived this, I need to correct something to what you say. Number one, John McMahon lives up in Massachusetts. But he didn't contact me through Colin Wallace. He contacted me through my law office in Northern Ireland. And then they contacted me if I was willing to speak with John. And also, John was not abused in his home. He was abused outside of his home in a private facility in Belfast. And Colin Wallace did work for the Army Intelligence Services, and he was posted there in 1970. And then he tried. Him and Brian Cameron was involved with under the intelligence services that was appointed in Lisburn, and he and Colin were trying to get these allegations looked at in 1973, and it's a shame because if they had looked into these allegations at that particular year, and then it could have been prevented from me being transferred into Kincora. They totally ignored that investigation. So I hope I've answered that.
Yeah, and it's being covered up until this day. I was talking to, I believe it was Mr. Wallace, about there's certain documents that are still not available, even to the investigators. Also, too, coming up, we have Andrew Lowney, who wrote a book about Lord Mountbatten. Why don't you give us a brief, I know we didn't talk about this before the show, but why don't you give us a brief explanation about how Lord Mountbatten fits into all this?
Well, that is another experience. I was advised not to talk too much on that particular experience because there is another survivor of this involved, and I am still in a legal process with my attorneys. We call it in America. I'm going to try to use the terminology for your listeners to understand what I'm saying. We call them attorneys in America, but in United Kingdom, they're called solicitors and barristers. So my solicitors have told me to not speak too much out about that experience.
Gotcha. But that does, by the way, too, there's going to be a documentary coming out in December called The Lost Boys.
Yes.
And how can people see that?
Well, I guess they will, when it comes out, it will be showing on the YouTube or whatever they want to do with that. But that's a story about boys who were being removed from Northern Ireland. The location was a place called the Falls Road. Falls Road was where the Catholics were. You got to, your listeners got to understand, part of that country had separated the Catholics from the Protestants, but they also lived in certain areas where they would live. These lost boys were Catholics. They were removed from the Falls Road at the bottom of the Grosvenor Road, and that's where they were last seen. And they're doing a story on that because people have been trying to cover it up. And there was one other boy that was found in a sack in not far from Kincora. He actually lived on a street called Reed Street, and that was located in front of a park where he lived. And there was a connection between that and Kincora, and that happened in 1973. And so there are things that happened and things that were covered up.
Gotcha.
And so I know of some of that experience, but there again, I've been given legal advice on that matter.
Are there any ongoing criminal investigations?
They have been trying to open up some criminal investigations. When there's an investigation going on, you can't speak out about it, and you can't talk about it because you don't want to jeopardize the investigation. So while that's going on, I do believe there are some going on, yes.
Okay. Now,
from what I've been told.
Now, originally, when I heard about Richard Kerr, I heard about your involvement with Roy Cohn. Now, how did this begin? How did you first come into contact with Roy Cohn?
Well, yes. He was one of many, if you don't mind me saying that.
Sure.
And when there's many, it becomes a very, very wide open discussion. But I will try to narrow it down to those who had impact on my life and where I am today. what shaped me and what groomed me where I am today. There are those who are groomed for the streets, and there are also those who are groomed for the elite. Okay. With my brother, he was groomed for the street. I was groomed for the elite. And my brother has a case right now as well. I need the public to know this. And so when I was taken into Williamson House, I was groomed during that process by outside influence, by other men who had visited the home. And I was taken out of the home. And I was taken to locations in the north of Ireland. And that stage, it was early on. I wasn't trafficked over anywhere to United Kingdom or Europe at that stage. So when I was introduced to certain men, they would come up in their car, and there was a back entrance of the Williamson House area where they would let us go out and play, but they would park their parked cars in the back of the home, and they would help me to get over the fence, and I was able to get into their car. And then they would take me on a journey, a ride journey, they call it. And so I ended up meeting certain characters, let's say, and things started to happen from there. And then I got to meet a number of people. I didn't know their names. You know, what's important here? I didn't know their names. They never used their surnames. They only used their first names. But they used the word uncle a lot. And the reason for uncle, Ed, is very important. I want the public to know this. They had to use the word uncle. They couldn't use the word father, because the child would not look physically looking like the uncle. So they can get away with that by using the word uncle, because children look like their father or their mother in some cases, right? So uncle was the proper word for them to use for the cover-up, and because of the physical look of the child. So anyway, I was people were connected to this home from other homes in that area, and when I was taken out of the home, I think it was 1975, I was taken to Kincora, that place on East Belfast, and it continued on. And getting with Roy, who I didn't know who Roy was at that time, understand that. Sure. I was taken down to the Europa Hotel. It was around by 1976, I believe, June, because of the weather. The weather helps me to understand the timeline, because of the weather, you know, the day of the weather, the summer and the autumn. So I was taken to the Europa Hotel, and this was not the first time I've ever been taken there. I was taken there in 75. Also taken there in 74 when I was in Williamson House. So the goal about this hotel, it was the most bombed hotel in the whole of Europe. It was bombed 27 times by the professional IRA. And they always give a warning so that all of us can get out of the hotel. A 15-minute warning, they always did that. So anyway.
Richard, can I ask a question real quick before we move on? Because I know that the IRA, they bombed Mountbatten as well, too, and they bombed this hotel. Is it possible they were aware of the abuse that was going on of children, and this is one of the things they were fighting against?
Looking back and with an open mind and being clear about who was involved, and took me almost 15 years to make sure that I had my details down and the help of professional people who could do this and do a timeline sheet. And yes.
Okay.
I'm just answering you yes on that.
Okay, so then you were just about to tell us how you first came into contact with Roy Cohn, Uncle Roy.
You mean Marfus? He had a middle name used, But anyway, Marfus or Mathis. But anyway, he was with someone else. I was taken to the Wit and Saddle Bar. There was a bar called the Wit and Saddle Bar at the Europe Hotel. And the bar downstairs was the bar for outside residents. That what I mean by that, they were not residents of the hotel.
Right.
Right? So the prospect, the way they operate was, in those days, if anybody checked into a hotel, they can hand their key over to someone else. They only show key cards, but they did not have anything, the technology they do, where you put a key card through the door. It was so easy to transfer your key over to someone else who was not a resident or signed into the hotel. They could cover up their information that way. So I believe that's what happened in this case, because when I was told to sit in the bar area, in one of the corner areas, there were 3 or 4 gentlemen there, and I believe 3 of them were Americans, because I've gone over their accents. One time I was there, I thought they were from Scotland, but they were not. They were Americans. And because of what happened to me later on. I was introduced to Roy, and he didn't come across as a very aggressive person. I have to say that. He didn't come across to me or treated me. Because, I'm a child. My perception, I'm seeing the world through the eyes of a child. So to me, he was just another person that was just another abuser.
Well,
and
how old were you, Richard?
Or anything else.
How old were you?
At that age, so this would happen in June 1976. That would have been 14, 15 years of age at that particular time when I met Roy.
Now, Richard, would it be unusual for a 14-year-old boy to be in a bar, in a hotel bar, by himself?
Well, at that age, I've got to take you back to Williamson's House, because I was groomed from the age of 6 or 7 upward. So I already had that experience, you see. So to ask me that question in 1976, it'd be like saying nothing happened prior to that. So I was aware of it. I wasn't constantly aware of what was going on, but by that time, I had some awareness of what they wanted to do.
Now here in the States, when we see Roy Cohn on TV, he's kind of snarling and surly, very angry type. Was he angry, or was he friendly with you?
No, he wasn't angry. He was friendly.
He was friendly.
Sorry, but that's my experience, and how other people perceive him, that's up to them.
So then ultimately, though, you traveled with him outside of the country.
I traveled. I didn't actually travel. He didn't take me. He wasn't the one who took me outside of the north of Ireland.
Okay.
I was taken to him, and by a number of other people, we'll call them foot soldiers. I was taken to him. Right. I was taken to Liverpool. I was held in a holding bay there off the docks. And then I was put on a train. And then I was met on the other side in London. And I was taken to a place in King's Cross in London. And then from King's Cross, I was asked to go with three, 2 Americans and 1 English person. And I was taken on a train, and I believe it was called, at that particular journey, it was a boat train. That's all I remember. It was a boat train that left at a Victoria station. And I was taken over to Dover, and then they transferred us over from Dover to another train on the other side, and that took us into Paris. And then I was taken from Paris through another train along downwards into Switzerland, and then flew into Venice. And that's then I was taken to a hotel.
Wait, let me stop you there, Richard. And these other spots like Switzerland and Paris, did you come into contact with adult men for the purpose of abuse at those locations, or was it just in transit?
That was just in transit.
Just all that travel just for this, okay.
Yes. Yeah. I was taken into a hotel called the Gritty, Giffle, the Gritty Palace Hotel. And I was introduced to Roy again.
Did you remember him from your previous encounter?
Yes, I did.
Okay, now was he like?
Well, I mean, he dressed differently that time,
right?
But he still had the. It was him. You know, you get the. You know, the thing about my journey. For some reason, I don't know if people will understand this. Ed, I was kind of like a super glue. Do you know what I mean by that?
No, I don't.
Okay. For some reason, I don't understand it. When they became obsessed over me, so it wasn't a first encounter. I really never really had a lot of first encounters because they came back. You see, and that's how it happened with Roy. Roy was this kind of man who he was loyal. I mean, he if you were taken into his world, his life, he doesn't let you go. You know, he's not just going to turn around and walk away. You know, you see that kind of personality. You know, if he said he's going to be there for you, he kind of follows that up with actions.
So now, when you're with Roy Cohn in Venice, did you stay in the same room with him? Did you have your own room?
No, a room. No, a room was reserved, and I'll give you the room number: 303. 303.
So you stayed in the same room with him?
Yeah, I was taken to the room. Yeah, I actually wasn't taken. He asked me to come up to the room, up the elevator.
So now, were you allowed to I guess you were alone a lot of the time, right? But you were so conditioned and groomed that you just obeyed the orders of these people.
Well, I wasn't really alone,
no.
Ed. There were people there in the lobby. There were people sitting on those fancy Egypt chairs. There was a lot of stuff from Egypt. Okay? So, you know, when you walk in, they had that marble floor, and they had the two pillows right on the right-hand side. I can say things about things because, you know, people today, they say, well, you can get all that information from the Internet. Well, that's not true.
Right.
I lived it.
But my question is, though, were you like alone?
No, I was not alone.
No, there were people there who were supervising you at all times?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So how many nights did you spend with Roy Cohn in Venice?
No, it was only that one night.
One night.
Believe it or not. It was just the one night. And he was with someone else.
Another adult or another child?
With him.
Another adult or another child?
No, just another adult.
And who was that adult?
I'm not sure who it was. I never asked a lot of questions. Because when you're in this situation, you after a while, you don't ask who they are. You don't ask where they come from. You don't. I mean, I was still a childlike, even though I might have been 15 at the time, but I still had. Unfortunately, I had the maturity of a child of 11. Okay.
What, now, Mr. Kerr, too, I'm sure your education wasn't an ideal education either. Could you read and write and all that kind of stuff like the average kid?
No, I couldn't because I was affected when I was 6 years of age. It affected my education.
And I'm sure that Kincora...
when I was taken to the schools and why I was isolating and I couldn't shower, the headmaster of that school tried to find out what was going on, and then they blocked him too. They blocked a lot of people from investigating. And but getting back to Roy, he was a character. I have to admit that he did have a lot of jokes when I was in a room, you know. And then he kept mentioning this movie called Death in Venice. And I just remember these kind of little conversations he had with me.
What was the significance of the movie Death in Venice?
I don't know. I have looked it up. It's about a boy that somebody met in Venice. And, you know, it's like taking me back, but not to that degree. I mean, I'm just saying that he brought that up. And I didn't even know that till later on.
So then you only spent one night with Roy Cohn in Venice?
Just the one night. I was there 3 days in Venice.
Okay. Now, Mr. Kerr, we were talking about your trip to Venice, and you said you spent 3 days in Venice, but it was 1 day with Roy Cohn, right?
That's correct.
Where did you go after that?
In Venice?
Yeah, like after your contact with Roy Cohn ended, what did you do then? You spent your 3 days there.
I was taken to a bar called Harvey's Bar. This bar was for certain people that would be where they would meet up. So I was taken to Harvey's Bar in Venice, and the bar was a very interesting bar. They ordered me fish and chips, and they served the fish and chips with white gloves on.
Really?
Yes, unbelievable, isn't it? I believe in those days, and it was very, very expensive fish and chips. I asked one of the handlers, or one of them. I did ask. I asked, well, how much is those fish and chips? And in Italian money, it was kind of the same as in American dollars. It would be $35. Okay. So I was ordered a Coke for me and fish and chips, and they started to have their conversations. And that's when they said to me, do you know who you were with? I said, no. And they said you were with a very famous attorney. I didn't think too much about it. I didn't comprehend. I didn't take in the information. That's all I remember. And I was taken out to certain places like museums and on the gondoliers, because that's the way they would use their transportation. And I was taken to a place called Pisa. Pisa was a little town, the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Sure.
Okay. And if you put your hand out where they take a photograph, you think the pieces, that little tower's leaning on you.
And you sent me a bunch of those pictures, okay? This little boy traveling through Europe, all these European countries, with no explanation. And you obviously couldn't afford to do this on your own. But now, there's pictures. Who took the pictures, and why did they allow you to have a camera?
I didn't have a camera. They took the photographs, and now we would have to go back to what happened in Northern Ireland, some of these hotels. In those days, they took a photograph, and a Polaroid shots. Now, where they would have these Polaroid shots in the residence that I was placed in. Now, they would take more than one shot. So they also had them stacked in their drawers. So I was able to get my hands on it because I put them down my little socks. I had sandals on my socks. Okay? And there's a thing that happened to me because of so many people were involved and abused. I started to steal items. I've learned why I did that. Is to take something belonging to them because they took something from me.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense. You risked. That must have been a huge risk, though, taking those photographs and sticking them in your sock. Weren't you afraid that they would catch you and kill you?
I didn't think about fear. Let me explain something to you about that. I grew up in a country that had war. War was normal. It wasn't the unnormal. And, we didn't have the bombs going off and assassinations happened in Northern Ireland. And then it was not a good day, Ed. Because we were not used to peace.
Right.
So when you're growing up in that world, I know your viewers are going to have a hard time understanding some of this, and that's okay. But when you grow up with the kind of violence that goes on in the country, it becomes a part of your life, even though you don't understand what's going on as a child. But it's the normal. Because they would put sellotape on our windows when the bomb goes off so the glass wouldn't splatter. We were used to this.
And it wasn't just the bombs. It was assassinations, kidnappings, and this is a very small area, very small population. So everybody was affected by this. Let me ask you this. So back to the situation with the Roy Cohn thing. You mentioned to me off the air that you had some information about the man that was traveling with Roy Cohn. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, his name was Ferguson. He was from, they were from the United States. And he was a very political person involved with the Republican Party. He was a good friend with Ronald Reagan. So he was kind of the guiding guy, like the sponsor kind of thing.
Okay.
And he would be making certain decisions. And he had abused me too in Venice. But he also abused me. He was the one who abused me at the River Hotel. It wasn't Roy. At that particular time period. So he got along. I mean, they were communicating. Well, I'm sitting there wobbling my little leg. You're on this horrible bench chair at that Harvey's bar. Because they had, I just remember the bar. It was all wood inside, all wood, hardwood wood. And they had like train cubicles inside the bar. So you're separated by glass. And so anyway, I could just look. It took me a number of years for this, but looking back, there were they had communications, and more I learned he had worked for an oil company. And he was an engineer. He was involved in the Scotland North Sea Oil Company. He was the designer.
Now, is he alive today?
No, he passed away, I believe, in 98, I believe.
Now, we know that Roy Cohn died of AIDS. Do we know what this Ferguson died from?
He died of cancer.
Okay. Now, at what age did you put two and two together and realize that the man you knew as Roy in that hotel room in Venice was Roy Cohn, the attorney for Donald Trump and the associate of Ronald Reagan, this political figure, this powerful attorney?
Yes, very, very good question. And this is where people get complacent. I want you to try, at least try, or I want your audience to try and look at from this. I knew about this when I was 20. Okay? Now, the reason I couldn't speak out or talk about it with him, not just Roy. Roy was a small person in my life, as far as I'm concerned, the people who were that I was introduced to. And I don't mean to say that in a harsh way, okay? Nobody in this world can impress me. I've been everywhere. Now, the point I'm making is that I was still in the velvet cage. So there was no way for me to escape. They were providing my security, my needs that I needed. So there was no way for me to kind of go anywhere.
Wait, Mr. Kerr, let me just clarify. You're telling me now that you were sex trafficked until you were 20 years old?
Yes. Because, when you're forced, it is not your will.
Right. And you realize at 20 years old that one of the people that abused you was Roy Cohn. You recognized him from TV or something like that?
I recognized him not from the television, from what their conversations were to me. And then later on, a bit later on, when I was taken to New York. Remember, I was taken to New York City.
Okay. And you saw Roy Cohn there again?
Yes.
Okay. And how old were you when you were taken to New York?
At that particular time, the first time I was taken there, I was still living in the United Kingdom. I probably was 18, 20.
Okay, 18 years.
20.
And Cohn recognized you? He remembered you? He was happy to see you?
Oh, yes. Great memory.
And where'd you go with him?
That's one thing about Roy. His memory, he could recall little moments. Now, he could recall little moments.
Where did you stay in New York? Because I'm from New York. What hotel did you stay at in New York City?
I was staying at the Marriott Hotel in Times Square.
Okay. And how did you come into contact with Roy Cohn at that time? Who took you to him?
I believe they made a phone call, and I was taken to arrange him at a restaurant somewhere in, I think it might have been Queens.
Okay.
So that's how I was taken to him, and he was with a group of people.
How many people?
When I was taken into the restaurant, there was Fred, there was Stephen, there was Roy, there was a guy. I think he might have been some. Well, I heard the word senator, and they just said he was from Nevada somewhere.
No.
He was a senator of Nevada.
No, were you the only teenager there in the group, or were there other young men or children?
I was the only one.
Did anybody?
That's what I recall. I was the only one.
Did anybody look or act surprised that Roy Cohn would be with a young man? An 18-year-old?
Would you ask that again?
Were any of the other guests at the restaurant surprised to see Roy Cohn with a young man?
Well, that's a good question. I never thought about that at the time. Let me look back on this. Because by that time, a relationship has been established with all these players, let's say.
All right.
So it's possible that they probably ignored it. But to say that they wouldn't have known, I think they may have known.
Gotcha. Now, was there any abuse from any of these?
I was also taken up to the Witness of the World.
Was there any abuse by any other men besides Roy Cohn on that trip in New York?
Mr. Ferguson's friend, Stephen.
How did you leave off with these people? How'd you leave New York?
They took me back to the airport. We left on a plane.
Back to Ireland?
No, not to Ireland. We went back to London.
Now, how did you ultimately, because at some point in your life, you broke away from all these traffickers and went on your own way. How did you escape from all this?
I didn't. I didn't.
No?
I want the world to understand that. You don't get away. Some of them die. And then as they die, the world starts to go away from you. You don't go away from it.
They sort of just forget about you.
As long as you keep your mouth shut.
Gotcha. Now, did you run across, in your trip to New York or your trip to Venice, did you run across any other young boys that were also being trafficked?
Well, I had a friend who was being trafficked. I had many friends. I wouldn't say friends, but there were other children, let's say.
Right.
That were being trafficked as well. And Stephen was one of them. I will give you another name of a boy who was trafficked, but was not in the children's homes. And his first name, I can use his first name, Danny, because they went out of the way to change his name anyway when he was taken to the United States.
Now, Mr. Kerr, were there any boys you knew along the way that turned up dead or disappeared?
Stephen Warren died on the ship in November of 1977.
And do you know how he died?
Well, I have to be careful here, Ed, because his brother is still alive.
Okay.
And I'm in contact with his brother on this matter. He was October of 77. We were taken into the RUC, and we were questioned about certain burglars that we were bringing into people's homes that were abusing us. Now, then I threatened the judge in the courtroom, and I told him that I was going to tell everything what's going on with us. So the reporters got a hold of that, and then everything started to skyroll. They couldn't control it. They couldn't put the lid on. And the only way they tried to put the lid on that, as it's on the front page of the Irish Independent Times, they tried to put Richard into a facility to lock him up. That's what they did.
We've only got about 4 minutes left, okay? Is there anything about Roy Cohn that I haven't asked you want the audience to know?
Well, there's within the 4 minute period, I really can't answer that because it would take. There's a lot more.
Okay.
So I guess we'll have to do another.
No, we'll have to do another. And so, what do you want to leave us with to sum up today's episode?
Well, I just want to say is that I have a good friend in the United Kingdom, and I have a dear friend called Kevin Martin. I just want to say to him that he's been in search for justice for his brother. Kevin has, who went missing in 1979, November 1979. So I wish that they would look into that more, because there are things that are connected to this. So I also want to wish to state that if they had looked into this, and they weren't going to anyway, but if they had looked into Cornwall's allegations and Brian Cameron and Roy Gardner allegations earlier on, they could have prevented from other children being damaged. And that's the shame on what happened here.
Well, I agree with you there, and hopefully if we do enough shows about this, more people will come forward with more information that we can possibly put together something here and get some action on this. If anybody has any information about these cases, please contact the show at oppermanreport@gmail.com. Mr. Richard Kerr, I can't thank you enough, okay? People keep an eye out for this movie coming out, The Lost Boys, coming up in December. So, Richard, keep in touch, okay? And keep feeding me these other guests. We have one coming up, Mr. Lowney, Andrew Lowney, And then he put me in touch with another one, Tony Daly, who's written about these topics as well.
I know. He's from Londonderry, Northern Ireland.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good night.